What's up, guys? We're back on the tractor today. We are going to do a snorkel. So I bought the cheapest parts I could find on eBay. I will put the links below to the parts that I'm using. We are doing a snorkel, and it is an 8-valve. They say that it only works on a 16-valve. I'm pretty sure it'll work on both, because once you get out to the airbox, it appears that they're both the 16s and the 8 valves are very, very similar off to that side. Again, I'm not terribly familiar with tractors. I'm kind of learning as we go too. But anyway, generally, if you're doing a 16 valve, it'll basically be the same. We're just going to be making it work on an 8 valve. Okay, so someone had on this thing already put a aftermarket air cleaner on it. We put an aftermarket air cleaner on it because the factory air box, this is wrapped in electrical tape, so apparently that was falling apart. And then there's a bunch of glue and stuff inside of it. So, and then this is the part that was, I guess, in the fender well, maybe? Must have been in the fender well on the inside. So you would be taking this part out. The snorkel is designed to work with this for a 16 valve. And again, this is where the differences may lie between 16 and 8. We're not going to use any of it. We're going to take all that out. We're going to take what they did to that tracker out. And I'm going to try to use this guy. And this was extremely inexpensive. It was less than $20. And basically the only thing I needed out of it was this tiny little air filter. And it's a sealed air filter so that we don't have an open element inside the car, and it just was the right diameter for this. It looks like carbon fiber. I don't think it actually is. It's just a sticker. It does look pretty legitimately carbon fiber. It may actually be. That's really weird. But anyway, it's just a simple oiled air cleaner, which on this you don't have mass. It's just manifold absolute pressure. So it won't hurt the mass airflow sensor. And there is an intake and an exhaust on this, and in and out. It's not labeled, but that's the inside of the filter, so that would obviously be on the engine side, and then that is the side that will be on the intake side. So, okay, let's get going.
Let's see sausage getting made.
Sausage?
Yeah. You ever heard that expression?
No.
You don't want to see the sausage get made? Everyone likes sausage, but you don't want to see it get made.
Oh, okay.
This is the sausage.
Oh, I'm making sausage right now?
Making sausage.
All right, that was Austin Colson you saw there. That was, he took a wrong turn and ended up in Spokane somehow. Now I'm just going to take everything off of this thing, intake related, so that we can kind of start from scratch. All right, guys, so I'm assuming, and that's really all I can do in my scenario, since I don't have another one of these to look at with a 16 valve, but I'm assuming that this is probably in the same spot for both 16 and 8 valve, and I'm hoping that's the case, because this is where this could go crazy. But the snorkel basically goes through the fender and out this hole, is my understanding of how that thing is supposed to work. So if everything works out, then if this is the same, then this would work on both 8 and 16 valve, and there's really no change. All right, so now it's template time, and this template actually works out really well. It is perforated, so you can tear it instead of cutting it. And on mine, the perforation wasn't exactly on the lines. It probably was close enough, but I went ahead and just cut it out right on the lines instead of the perforation, and it really probably wasn't necessary on that. So once I get this thing on there, I just use a center punch to punch out to mark the centers of the holes. So even though they're perforated around all the bolt holes and stuff, don't pull them out. And I made the mistake of pulling the big one out and ended up having to tape it back later. Or just here in a second I'll tape it back, because you don't really care so much about the outside of it. You need to know the center if you're going to cut out with a hole saw. If you're going to cut it out some other method, then yeah, you probably need to trace around it. But really, if you have the right size hole saw, you only really need the center. So I did that, and then once I pulled it off, I'll just circle all the center punch marks with a Sharpie so I know right where they're at, and then just start drilling stuff. .3 1/4 hole saw is what I'm going to use. It says 85 millimeter. It's pretty close. I highly recommend not going undersize, because if it doesn't work, it's kind of harder to make them go over that. So I'm just going to line it up so I can get the hole through it, and then once we're through, we will angle it and hope kind of going at an angle this way, so I'm just going to try to simulate the exact same angle. Okay, so there are these nuts, and that takes off the ducting on the inside of the car. So that intake stuff that he sent me must not have gone to this car or something, because I appear to still have it in there, and I never even looked. I just assumed it was all out. So I'm going to take those nuts out, and hopefully we can get this out of there without taking the wheel off. All right, so when it comes to hole sawing through thin metal like that, especially when it has paint, spin it really fast. That's not normally how you'd use a hole saw, but that seems to work better. And the harder you try, the more likely it is you're going to screw up your paint. Ooh, barely. There you go. There's the poor man's snorkel. Right, and now it's time to drill the holes for the mounting that Vitara snorkel on the fender. They're 8mm bolts, so it's about 5/16, but they give you fender washers for the fasteners, so you can go quite a bit oversized, and I highly recommend doing that. Go oversized, go at least 3/8. You can probably go 7/16 on them. It would be fine, and actually probably be beneficial. I'm using a die grinder to take the burrs off, and then we're going to touch up the paint. Now here's a shop hack. We've all probably done this before. Makeup brush. They're really good touch-up brushes. Clean them out when you're done. She'll never know. So the makeup brushes work really well. Just clean them out with some lacquer thinner when you're done. I've used that same makeup brush for quite a while. I did get in trouble initially for taking it. I guess those are kind of expensive, but you know, whatever. So what I just showed you there, that's an electrical, they call it duct seal, but you get down the electrical aisle of the hardware store, it never dries. It stays soft indefinitely. I've been using it for, I don't know, 5 years or so on stuff, and every time I take something apart, it's still soft. It'll kind of skin over just a little bit, so it's not sticky after it sits, but it never dries. 2.5 fits in it. I could just do it that way. I'm going to put a couple slits in it and clamp it. Don't want to go in too far or you'll restrict flow. Alright, so that we kind of jumped right into that, but I had missed cutting off that tube. I cut that off of the Vitara snorkel. I cut it down because we're not using the factory air box. If you're using the factory air box, basically that would just slide through the fender, through the hole on the inside, and into the box. I'm not doing it that way. We're going to use 2.5-inch exhaust tubing to get to that air filter that I had got. So that's why I cut that off. That's why I put those slits in it, and that's so the hose clamp will clamp the Vitara snorkel around that 2.5-inch exhaust tube, which is the same diameter as the intake. So we didn't choke it down or anything. That is the size it needs to be, and we're going to use that's mandrel bent tubing. So we'll get to that in a second. So now there's a bracket that goes on the pillar up the windshield. I kind of zoomed in there so you can't really tell where it is. It has stainless steel rivets, so they're 3/16. So I just put the first one in, mark it, put the first one in, and actually just drill it and squeeze the rivet in there, and then just use the bracket as a guide for the rest of them. You could take it off. I just was able to flex it out of the way. It does flex around a little bit. And then just put the bolts in and you're done. That's all there is to it. I put that sealer stuff in between that bracket and the body, and you couldn't see that, but that's what I did on that. So that kind of got sealed up as I tightened it up. So now I'm just doing some measurements with the exhaust tubing. There's a lot of eyeballing involved in doing that, and I ended up having to make my last 90 needed about 3/4 of an inch extra, so I couldn't just take a 180 and split it in half and twist it. I actually had to use a 90 because I needed a little extra. All right, so now I did have to grind it out a little bit. The angle was slightly off, so I ground it and it's really close, if not perfect now. So now it basically needs to go to about, when I'm looking down, the middle of the strut bolt. That's how I kind of just eyeballed it, instead of trying to do some crazy measuring. But with the intake on there, if I go to, if that tube is to about the middle of the shock bolt, it'll be in far enough that we can get a clamp, and then it's just expanding out to 3" from there, and then back to 2.5 for the fuel injection. That just happens to be, that's just what they are. So this is the same size as the factory tube. The air filter just happens to be a little bigger. So that is that. So that's on there. So now I could just put a clamp on our Snorkel, and that'll hold this pipe. And then these two are going to be welded together right there, just like that. And so that's the next step. So now I'm just going to kind of aim this so I can get as close as I can. And there's quite a bit of fudge room here. And then what I'm going to do is just draw a line. And that'll be it. So now we just put it back together, line up our line, and it technically should work after we weld it. So that's what we're going to do right now. All right, so now line up our mark, get the tube lined up. Alright, I'm just welding it up. I'm doing MIG, and then later on here in a minute I'm going to grind it down just so it looks like it was all one piece. The welds don't ever turn out very good when you're doing a butt weld like that. If you're doing MIG, if you're going to TIG weld it, you have to remove all the aluminum. That's aluminized pipe. You'll have to remove all of it, or the weld will basically burn on you. Unfortunately, TIG welding is kind of a pain on that aluminum pipe, aluminized pipe, I should say. Now I made that cut. That's the cut that we eyeballed over the strut bolt. And now I'm just going to grind it. We're going to clean it up and get it ready for paint. And what I'm using there is it's just a 90-degree die grinder, and that's actually a little tiny flat bit that uses that thread-on 3M style connector. I don't remember what they call it. Scotch lock, I think is what they call it. It actually is pretty handy. It works pretty good. Now I'm Scotch-Brighting it. Just to clean it up so that we can paint it and, you know, make a show car out of our Geo Tracker. And now while the paint's drying, I painted it outside, I didn't film it. While the paint's drying, I'm putting the top on the Snorkel. That thing you can either run forward or point it backwards, depends on what type of terrain you're going on. If you're driving down the highway a lot with bugs, I would definitely turn it around. Alright guys, I don't know where that battery died at, but it really was just hooking the parts up. I did screw up the paint on that intake tube because that's what I get, because I have someplace I have to be. So I screwed it up, so I kind of painted it, and it's still really wet, but it's a little gougy. So once everything's really dry, I'll sand that and I'll respray it. Not that we're building a show rig here. All right, this is actually the next day. I'm sanding it, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and mask it off and repaint that. I don't know why I'm putting this much effort into that thing, but you know, it is what it is. Yeah, I can never leave good enough alone. That's Rust-Oleum Professional. It's like top shelf at Home Depot. It's the only place I've really found that you can buy it local. It looks just like the normal stuff, but it's way better. And the satin black, I cannot express enough how good that satin black is on that one, and it's always consistent, and it looks amazing. I almost want to paint a hot rod with it. That is Bulldog Adhesive Promoter. I'm putting that on before we put our little logos on the side. They came with these sticker logos. That will make stickers not ever fall off. I don't know if you have experience putting stickers on plastic. They usually eventually start falling off, and that's because plastic off-gases. It's the same if you're wrapping a car with a vehicle wrap. Direct plastic like that, it falls off. Those emblems look pretty cool. They're actually pretty nicely done. All right, guys, there is the Vitara Snorkel on a tracker. So that was relatively easy to install. That was not something that I think most people couldn't have done. The only thing that you may want to do different is just the intake. If you're going to do a custom intake like this, which I would probably do again, I definitely would do again instead of using the factory airbox. But you could do these in plastic. They do make kits where you basically just hack some apart and then they couple together. So you just want a 2.5 inch version of that. I'll show you what a 4 inch one looks like, the way you get it. And it also comes with couplers and stuff. But then you just cut it where you need it in between these grooves. And that gives you a guide, and then when you clamp them together, your clamp goes behind it, so it's like barbed, you know. So they're really good. They work pretty good. Sometimes you get lucky and you can just cut a section of that out and get the right bends in it. In our scenario, that's the way they come, is like that. That one has a couple pieces cut off of it already, but there's no S's like you need, so you would have to kind of come up with your own little S. Okay, so you got your snorkel on. Really high-end snorkel, especially for what you pay for them. Stainless steel hardware, stainless steel rivets. Those are hard to pull, as a warning. Really nice quality ABS. It's pretty good. Yeah, overall I love it. Are you ready to take your rig underwater? Like, can you submerge your rig now because you have a snorkel? Short answer is no. No, you cannot. That is not, I would not go in water really above the top of the tire at the way it's set up right now. And this will keep your rig safe for that, and that's better than the factory intake, but it is not ready to have water over the engine. It will stall and you will probably ruin a lot of stuff on your rig. So let's get this thing started up and you can hear what it sounds like. This is stock exhaust with just a snorkel and that high flow air filter. Okay, so I don't know what that sounds like on camera yet, but it sounds pretty good. You can hear that intake pretty good. So there's basically no exhaust note as of now. This is an 8 valve and it has a cold high idle. It's really annoying, and that is something I want to address on this show a little later, is trying to get these things to idle a little lower when they're cold. I think they did that so the cats would warm up. But they made them idle at 2,500 until they're warmed up. So it's really weird. Well, it slowly goes down as they warm up, and then they idle normal. But yeah, they idle really high. It's really weird. But anyway, we will address that. I'm going to see if I can't fix that, and we're also going to build a custom exhaust on it. I do want a little bit of exhaust note out of it. I don't want it to be loud, just obnoxious, but I want to be able to hear it and make it sound a little sportier, because I was not expecting this thing to be as responsive as it is. It's very responsive, and it actually is like a peppy little rig. A lot more than I was expecting. So now it makes me want to open up the exhaust a little bit and do that type of stuff. This has a new exhaust on it, and I do believe it's way smaller than the factory stuff. It is tiny. I can pretty much plug it with my finger. It is crazy tiny exhaust. So I would like to put a more performance exhaust on it. I don't think I'm going to do a header or anything, but I may. We'll see. I don't think a header would really buy you that much, but we may do it just for the experience. But yeah, anyway, stay tuned. We will be back very soon. We got lots of projects going on. I think I'm going to fix the AC on this next, so hang in there for that.